Hello guys, this is Edward here. Today I'm going to tell you the story of my childhood. This incident happened to me when I was 13 years old. How can I forget that incident? Those days were very dark and creepy for me. When I was 13, my family, me, my mom and dad, shifted to the new house. And we were very happy for the new start, but we were unaware of impending danger. Well, we shifted to the new house, had dinner at night, and went for a good sleep. As I was 13, my parents had to go to the office daily. That's why they hired a babysitter, Laura, for me, because my school holidays were going on. She even used to help me with my studies. So it was time for my parents to come home, and almost 20 minutes before Laura left for home. I was having my cake, and suddenly, I felt like I heard someone weeping slowly. In our new house, there was a basement room, and I was literally terrified because that voice was coming from the basement room. I made up my mind to check it and walked downstairs to the basement. All I could see is nothing but a dark and creepy room there. I heard something, and it wasn't a voice. It was a piece of metal dragged across the table. I felt like someone was playing with a bouncing ball. I ran to my room at once. I was very scared at that time. I told this incident to my parents when they came back home. They took this thing as a joke. They said they will clean the basement room tomorrow and they will check. First night in the house was fine, but the second night in the house went very scary. Whenever I remember that night, I get goosebumps badly. How scary and creepy that second night was. I was feeling someone's presence. I thought it was my parents, but when I checked them, they were sleeping in their room. So that night, when I was doing my homework after dinner, I noticed very unusual and creepy things. I heard in a kid's voice say, "Edward, Edward, can you hear me? Edward." I ran to my parents' room at once. I was extremely scared and didn't even sleep a wink. Next day, I got a fever and was even unable to walk because I laid in terror the previous night. I told my mother everything when my fever went down. I told my parents about the creepy voice and the kids' weeping sound. My father didn't let me go down there after that incident. The same day, my parents went down there and cleaned the basement room together, and surprisingly, they found a letter there. There was an apology letter. When my parents bought this house, they knew about a woman named Tina. They didn't tell me about Tina because I was a kid and they were afraid about my health. After some days, I came to know about Tina when I heard two people talking about her death. She was found dead in the house, and you know that house now. Yes, that was my new house. I was really creeped out. I at once ran to my parents and asked them to leave this house immediately, but they convinced me to stay there for 4 days to arrange another apartment. My parents were very worried about my health because I was behaving differently from 2 days ago. My parents did a lot to arrange a new apartment, but it was not easy to arrange a new apartment immediately. 2 days had passed normally. So, only 2 days were left to stay at that house. But for me, 2 days were like 2 years. I asked my parents to sleep with me because I was afraid of that voice and creepy basement. At 2 a.m., I woke up from my sleep because I was feeling very thirsty. While she was filling the glass of water, she was whispering, "Edward, hey, Edward, you know your father is a bad man, a bad man." I screamed, "Dad, please help me, Dad!" That night was very horrible. I still remember that changed face of my mom. I remember her red eyes, heavy voice, creepy smile, and the way she was talking like, oh my God. My father woke up and comforted me. I told him about Mom, the way she was behaving, but my mom was unaware of all these things. When we asked her whether she remembered anything, she denied. Next day, we went to the police station to hand over that apology letter, where we all came to know that the apology letter was Tina's husband. His name was Arthur. A police officer named Mr. Brownie told us everything. Well, Tina was a good lady and she had a happy family. In her family, she had a son named Alex and a husband named Arthur. Yes, Arthur was Tina's husband, and the apology letter was from Arthur. It had been proven that Arthur killed his son. Yes, this all happened when Tina was not in the house because she was in the office. Alex's dad thought Alex would return home by 1 p.m. after school, but Alex wasn't feeling good. That's why he came home at 11 p.m. His father was unaware of it. So when Alex entered the room, he saw his dad with another lady. Alex caught them red-handed. He was a 14-year-old kid, but it was understandable to him that his dad is not a good man. He argued with his father and warned him. He asked his father to apologize to his mother and tell her everything. But his father knew that Tina is a brave lady. She would never live with a person who cheated on her. Tina belonged to a rich family, and Arthur never wanted to leave her. He knew that if she leaves her, he would be ruined. They argued and argued. Alex was not listening to his dad. Arthur was very angry and decided to kill his son with a knife. He stabbed Alex in the neck with the knife. Alex screamed, "No!" His last words were, "You're a bad man, a bad man." And Alex died suddenly after that. His father chopped up his dead body, hid it for 3 days in the basement, and later burnt it in the dense forest. His mother was unaware of this and she thought Alex had been kidnapped. They reported it to the police station, but she got nothing. But after 3 years, his father realized his mistake, what he had done that day. He realized his wife cannot live without his son, and her condition is not the same as before. He realized how much she and her son loved him, and how mean he was. Now, he wanted to tell everything to Tina because he was feeling very heavy and wanted to lighten his heart. Arthur didn't want to live like this. So the next day, he wrote an apology letter. He wrote that he had made a big mistake, and he finished everything. He wrote about that horrible day and wrote that he is committing suicide now. Tina was shocked and she hung herself in the room. But Arthur is still missing. Nobody knows where he is gone. When we heard that, we were all shocked and creeped out, and the next day, we left that house. I was such a scared kid, but trust me, this incident gives me chills to date. Hi, my name is Anya Clark, and I'm 28 years old. Well, I was 28 years old until my friend's husband brutally murdered me. Exactly why I came back to tell my story, I'm not sure of, but I'd guess it was to save my friend from her husband. You see, prior to me, he had violently murdered another two of our friends, Caddy Hansen and Jessica Linton. My spirit will be set free after telling this story, and most probably, many won't believe it. But think about it. Stranger things have happened in the world. Let's take a step back in time. It was Saturday afternoon, the 11th of August, 2012, and Caddy, Jessica, and I were visiting our good friend, Erica Hobson. We were all at college together and were close friends. We had deep and meaningful conversations together, but always had a good laugh too. 3 of us were still single. Only Erica had married. The 4 of us would sit around Erica's beautiful and quaint breakfast nook. Erica was a great baker, and the scent of fresh cookies and filter coffee added to the atmosphere. "Do you remember John Haynes, Erica?" asked Jessica with a smile. "Of course I remember John," answered Erica, blushing. "That guy really had the hots for you," teased Caddy. All of us laughed heartily. I chipped in as Erica's husband, Ryan, walked into the kitchen. "Well, John was hot," Erica said. "He wanted to marry me. Do you guys remember?" she added as we all laughed again. Erica's husband, Ryan, had a way of making us all feel uneasy. He was tall with dark brown hair and of average build, except for his potbelly. But it was his shifty eyes and emotionless presence that did it. Ryan put on a false smile, but looked troubled. When he smiled, it always looked fake, as his eyes never changed. "You ladies having fun?" he asked coldly. Everyone went silent. Only Erica answered, "Yes, in fact we are, Ryan. Do you ever have any of that?" "Any of what?" he asked sternly. Fun? Asked Erica. The three of us all felt uncomfortable, waiting for his reaction. Yeah, he answered, nodding his head up and down slowly. I have fun, he added with an evil grin on his face. Seems John had more fun than me, though, he said. Good old hot John, he said loudly, and then left the kitchen laughing. What's up with him? Whispered Caddy. He seems jealous, I added. Erica stopped as Ryan appeared. I'm what, honey? He asked aggressively. I was going to say that you're a good man. We all knew that wasn't it. Erica was afraid of him and unhappy in her marriage. Ryan's dislike for us went a lot deeper than any one of us could have ever imagined. 2 weeks later, Erica received an email from Caddy saying that she was moving to Australia and just how much she would miss our get-togethers. Then, 2 weeks after that, she also received an email from Jessica saying that she too was moving and wouldn't be able to come over again. How do I know all this? Like I said, I came back to tell this story. More about that later. What puzzled Erica was that she had tried to call both a few times, but both mobiles were turned off. One night, Ryan had gone out for a night out with the boys, as he told Erica. It was the same night that she received the email from Caddy. Now comes the ugly part. Ryan drove to Caddy's home that night, parking in the shadows. He entered her home with a switchblade in one hand and hid behind a cupboard in her lounge. As she came into the lounge, he grabbed her and violently slapped her around, and then, holding her mouth tightly closed from behind, he slit her throat. From the depth of the wound, she must have bled to death rapidly. Ryan let her lifeless body drop to the floor and opened her laptop on the dining table. You see, it was Ryan who had typed the email to Erica. Ryan wrapped Caddy's body in a thick black sheet of plastic, washed his hands, and to make certain no one saw him, placed her body in the trunk of his car. Caddy's moving to Australia, said Erica as Ryan arrived home. Oh, really? He answered. And you girls are such good friends, he added coldly. Shame. I guess you're gonna miss her, he stated with no expression. Are you okay? Asked Erica, sensing something was off with him. Yeah, just fine, honey, was his response. Little did Erica know that her friend's body lay in the trunk of her husband's car. In the early hours of the following morning, Ryan crept out of the house, hauled Caddy's body out of the trunk, and took her down to the basement, where he lay her on the ground. He then climbed the stairs and locked the door to the basement. Erica would never go down there anyway. It was his man cave. Another 2 weeks passed, and Erica sensed something was wrong with Ryan. He had never been a very loving husband, but he was behaving strangely. That night, he went for another night out with the boys. Erica found it strange as she had never met a friend of his. Maybe he's just stressed from work, she thought. He was angry and cold as he headed out for Jessica's home. In his mind, Erica was his possession, and he didn't want any friends interfering with that. Jessica's demise was different, horrifyingly different. She arrived at home and was just unlocking her door when she spotted Ryan's car pulling up in her driveway. What's he doing here? She thought, feeling uneasy. She took out her mobile to call Erica. Ryan saw it and ran at her, forcing her inside. She screamed and managed to get free. What do you want? She yelled. Please, don't, she screamed when she spotted his switchblade. Ryan tried to stab her, but she was moving and grabbed a ceramic pot and hitting him over the head with it, causing a huge gash on the side of his head. You bitch, he yelled. Then he managed to get a firm grip on her with both hands. One went over her mouth, and he slit her throat as she gurgled and kicked. Shit, he shouted, blood streaming from his head wound. He cleaned up as best he could and found her desktop computer and emailed Erica. The email was short and to the point. Hi, Erica. I'm leaving town and won't see you again. And that was it. He did the same thing he had done with Caddy and arrived home, a soaked bloody towel around his head. Ryan, my God! What happened, honey? Erica shouted in shock. Ryan had his answer ready. Ended up in a fight, he said, breathing heavily. Who did this to you? Shouted Erica. The other person. Looks worse, he said. In the early hours of the morning, he did the same thing as he had with Caddy. He carried Jessica's wrapped body down into the basement and laid it next to Caddy's. There was a stench beginning to build up in that basement. The next day was Saturday, and I went around to visit Erica. We started chatting about Caddy and Jessica leaving town, and Ryan was nowhere to be seen. I went to the ladies' room, and on my way, noticed blood stains leading down to the basement. Ryan appeared and startled me, his head bandaged. "What happened to you?" I asked. "Bar fight," he mumbled. "Let me show you something," he said suddenly. I felt uneasy, but he led me down to the basement. As I saw the two wrapped bodies and caught the stench, he put his blood-filled towel bandage around my throat and began strangling me. "Anya?" I heard Erica call from upstairs. And then everything went black. This is where it gets eerie. I saw Ryan coming up from the basement as I exited the ladies' room. I was alive, but he just murdered me. I don't know who got the bigger shock, Ryan or I, but he went white. A calming voice in my head said, "I have saved you." From that moment, I felt led. "Coming, Erica," I, or my physical spirit, answered. "Your eyes are sparkling, Anya," remarked Erica. "You just suddenly look so beautiful," she remarked. "Thank you, my friend," I said as I looked down to make certain I was real. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Ryan lying on the floor. He'd had a heart attack. Erica never heard a thing as I found myself chattering away as always, but I knew I was dead. How did I know all I've told you? It's hard to explain, but let's just say that Caddy and Jessica told me what had happened. Or their spirits did. Just then, Erica noticed a pungent smell in the air. "What's that awful smell?" she stated. I looked straight into her eyes and held her gaze. What is it?" Erica asked. "Everything is going to be full of sadness in your life for quite some time from now on," I heard myself say. "What do you mean?" asked Erica, looking frightened. "Don't move from here. Call the police and don't go down to the basement," I said in a calm voice. Erica began to tremble. "Be strong, Erica. You're going to be all right," I said as I felt myself beginning to fade. Erica called the police on her mobile, and the gruesome discovery in the basement of the bodies of Caddy, Jessica, and me, and her dead husband, placed Erica into PTSD. The years passed and Erica's grief healed. I saw her one last time as my spirit was set free, and I felt myself rise, smiling at her. She smiled back with tears in her eyes as I disappeared in a mist.
My name is Brian. This terrible incident happened to me when I was 9 years old. At that time, I was just a little child that could not understand anything. My school holidays were going on those days. My parents wanted to go to Paris for outings and fun, but my father did not want to take me with him. That day, my father was talking to my mother that I was still very young. "If we take him along, we'll not be able to enjoy it in Paris." Then my mother called her sister Janet and said, "Janet, can you come here to my house in 2 days to take care of Brian? Because both of us are going to Paris for a week on outings." But she refused because she was busy in her job for the next 6 days, and she advised my mother to hire a babysitter for me for a few days. My mother told my father about Janet's advice. He said, "That is a brilliant idea." He instantly called someone, maybe it was his friend, and said that he needed a babysitter for a week. He arranged it as soon as possible. I don't know how, but my father found a babysitter for me very quickly. The next morning, the doorbell rang. There was a beautiful girl named Olive at the door. She was smiling. She was a babysitter. She entered and sat on the chair. My parents were also sitting there, and all of them were talking. I was watching her from a little distance. My mother told her about my eating habits and all my stuff, etc. My father was continuously gazing at her. She agreed to babysit. After some time, she left. That same night, I saw my mother packing their baggage. I went to my room. My mother came to me. I was very sad because my parents were going to Paris without me. My mother pampered me. Brian, you are such a smart boy. Don't disturb your babysitter, Olive, and don't forget to eat while playing. I love you, my baby." The next morning, Olive came. My parents left the house because they had to go to the airport. Olive was taking care of me. She was not so bad. She used to play with me. The next day, Olive was talking on the phone. I was watching TV. She came to me and said, "Brian, it is your father on the call. Talk to him." Then I talked to my father and mother. I gave her back the phone and she continued on the call for an hour. Another day, Olive was in the kitchen. Her phone was on the table. I was watching TV. Then her phone rang. I saw the number on the phone. It was my father's number. I picked up the call. "Dad, when will you come home? I miss you." Then Olive came and she snatched the phone from my hand. Then she continued for a long time. All this continued for 5 days. After 5 days, early in the morning, I came out of my room. I saw my father sitting on the chair with Olive. I was happy to see him. I hugged him and said, "You were supposed to come back after 7 days, but you arrived early. Very good. And where's Mom?" He told me, "I reached here last night, but you were sleeping. Your mother is with her sister Janet. She will be here soon." My father was not looking happy to me. Olive was looking at my father and smiling. I didn't know, but something was weird. My father got close to Olive, hired her, and then went to the office. Olive was looking after me the whole day as before. At night, my father came. We 3 had dinner. I was missing my mom. Her chair was empty. Then after some time, it was time to sleep. Olive said goodnight to me and went to my father's room. My father also followed her and locked the door. It seemed odd. That was my mom's place. I was so sad but helpless. My father used to treat Olive as he treated my mother before. Next day was Sunday. Olive and my father were watching TV and laughing. My father said, "Brian, we're going out to the amusement park and we'll be back after 5 or 6 hours." I said, "Okay, Father, I'm going to get ready." "Brian, you're not going anywhere. Olive is going with me." Olive said, "Your breakfast is there in the kitchen with some fruits, ice cream, and snacks are in the refrigerator, okay?" Then they both left in the car. After 1 hour, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. It was Janet. I hugged her and started crying. I looked out here and there and then said, "Where's my mom? Why didn't you bring her with you? My father told me that she's with you." "What? But I came here to meet you and her." We both were shocked. Then I told her everything that my father said and what they both, Olive and my father, were doing. Then she went to my parents' room and checked something. She found my mom's baggage. Then she said, "She's been here." Then she was running all over the house and searching for something. Then finally she went to the basement. I also went there. She screamed to see my mother there. She was dead. Flies and insects were there on her body. It was dreadful. She was in a chair. Her hands were bound with a rope and a tape on her mouth. I was so scared to see her in dirty clothes, messy hair, and injuries on her face. There was so much blood on the ground, which had come from her head. Then Janet called the cops. They reached after some time. One of them asked me about my father and Olive. I told them that they were in an amusement park. The cops reached there and arrested both of them. Then my father told the cops that when they were in Paris, my father made a plan to return after 3 days on the pretext of his business meeting because he wanted to be with Olive, and he fell in love with her. She was very beautiful. Olive also loved him. They used to spend time on the phone for hours. The night they reached home, the same night when my parents were sleeping in the room, my mother woke up in the middle of the night when she saw that my father was not there in the bed. When she came out of the room, she heard sounds from Olive's room. Then she pushed the door harder. My father was on the bed with Olive. My father rushed to my mother. Then Olive hit her with a statue, which was a decoration in that room. Then my father strangled her. Then she died and they both dragged her to the basement. Olive and my father were both charged for the murder of my mother, and now have life in prison. I started to live with Janet. How unfortunate was everything for me. I lost my parents. I miss my mom so much.